Hi everyone, welcome back. So a few months ago now, I think my friend Dominica suggested that I rank my Too Faced palettes, and I have over 30 of them, and that's after having culled quite a few of the bad ones. So because there's so many of them, I'm just gonna dive straight in because this is gonna take a while. So the number one worst palette, I'm gonna start at the bottom and then work my way up to the best one. The number one worst palette that I have is the peanut butter and honey palette. What a disappointment this thing was. I loved the peanut butter and jelly palette, so when they launched this one, I was super excited about it, and then I got it and I'm like, you're just actually really terrible. So the shadows are fine, like they look pretty, but they just apply like absolute trash. Like they're just really bad. And what I couldn't understand about this one is why they made the three shades over on this side so similar to each other. At least the peanut butter and jelly palette had like a gold in here and another peach tone along with like one of those typical bone colored shades. And this one, it was just so pale over here, and then these shades just apply so terribly. What a letdown this thing was. It's hands down my worst palette by Too Faced currently in my collection, and I honestly don't know why I'm holding on to it. Maybe because I wanted to love it so bad, but really this is terrible. Okay, so the next few ones are all part of like their holiday launches, and they're like there's some holiday collection ones that have been really good, and you'll see those later on, but these ones are all kind of grouped together just because I never felt that they were that special. They were okay, just nothing miraculous. So which one was this? This is the Grand Hotel Cafe set. It pops off. Whoop, you've got the little flaps here, and then there's three palettes on the inside. These were adequate. I just don't feel like I've ever gone back to them, so I just want to mention them as kind of being towards the bottom of my list. So this was the Gingerbread Cookie palette, very neutral tone, so not that exciting for me personally. This one was the Eggnog Latte one, which was a little bit more interesting, but I did feel like the color combination was a little bit odd. And then this one is the Peppermint Mocha one, which I remember being my favorite just because it had a little bit more intrigue to it. So these were okay, but as with most of Too Faced holiday collections, they just end up being like adequate performance, you know what I mean? Like not terrible, but just really not the best in quality either. I no longer have the box set for this 3-pack. I don't really know what happened to it, probably too bulky. Another holiday collection one. Super Fun Night. I don't even, black shadow just fell on my white sofa. Okay, I'm not opening that one up again because that was too scary for me. Super Fun Night, don't remember anything about it. Natural Beauty, boring, brown, don't care. This one, I believe in pink. Pink tone really only because the blush is so strong, and I guess, well, Pink Christmas is also pinky, but not that impressive either. Okay, here's one that's not part of their regular holiday collection stuff, and I did expect so much more out of this palette, but it turned out to just be really bad. This is the Sugar Cookie palette. Now, there's a lot of these that I really like, and I really appreciate the tiny packaging on this and the fact that it's that tin compact packaging, but honestly, the shades in here are just bad. They don't apply well, they don't blend, they're not that inspiring either, and I just found them to be a weird array of shades in here. This is another one that I'm holding on to that I just don't really know why. They are marginally better in quality than the two holiday ones that I just mentioned, so that's why this is not at the total bottom of my list, but yuck, I don't really like them. The only one I really like is this silvery shade here called Nom Nom. Okay, another holiday one. You can see that the holiday collections just really, in general, don't do that well anymore. This one was the Christmas in New York one, and this is the Chocolate Shop palette. This one is fine, but it was honestly too repetitive from previous large holiday palettes, and I didn't find that there was anything especially unique in this one because the colors are so repeated from previous years. I can understand why somebody would like this if they were relatively new to Too Faced because it is a rather intriguing array of shades, but because it was so repetitive, to me, it really didn't have a lot of merit being in my collection. A beauty blogging friend did give this one to me, which was nice because at the time I was super obsessed with Too Faced, but that one has sat rather unused in my collection. Okay, I'm gonna mention these ones next, not because the quality is bad, but just because they're not my kind of colors. So they kind of fall a little bit lower on my list just because I'm not that into neutrals. So this is the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette. This is the newer packaging one. It has been redone quite a few times by now. It used to come in that cardboard packaging. Does anybody remember that, with like the little box drawer in it? So this one's fine. The quality is decent even, but it's just not up my alley. And even if I did really like neutrals, they're not really my kind of neutrals. These are very more on the cool tone side of things. I mean, we do have a honey gold here, but it still leans towards the cooler side of things. And when I want neutrals, I tend to go for more rusty, warm ones. So this one was, I mean, fine. Again, just not my taste. What I do like marginally better though than the Natural Eyes palette is the Natural Matte palette. And that's just because I tend to prefer mattes in general over shimmers, and there's a lot more shimmer in the Natural Eyes palette. So this is, again, all mattes, and the quality is really nice on these. They do blend out really well. But again, this is low down on my list just because there's so much neutral in it. It does lean a little bit more warm, especially with Au Naturel and Hookup up here. Risky Business, I do feel like there's an edge of warmth to it, but in general, it's just down on my list because neutrals are not really my jam. We're still in the holiday palettes. That's just how many of them I have. So this is the Best Year Ever palette from 2018. I actually did enjoy this more than most of the holiday ones because I found the color selection in this palette to be fairly unique. All of the other holiday ones tend to have like that deep evergreen, slightly turquoise color. They have a black, they have your typical neutral colors, and there's always that random hot pink that they threw in. This one was just a little bit softer and a little bit more interesting because a lot of the tones in here are a little bit more on the jewel side of things. They are more softer jewel tones, but it was still something that was very different for Too Faced in comparison to all their other holiday palettes. So I remember really liking Break the Ice here. Elfie Selfie is a really cool like gunmetal silver color. Silent Night is similar to Elfie Selfie, but it's got more of a blue cast to it. And I really liked this palette, especially since I've been so let down by some of their other holiday ones that I was really appreciative of this one. Another holiday palette that I did actually find was quite a bit better than their other ones was part of the Christmas in New York one again, but this is the Merry Macarons palette. And I think this one was an Ulta exclusive, so I had to have a friend pick this one up for me. This one, although cool toned, seemed to really appeal to me, and I think it's because they went cool toned purple as opposed to cool toned gray. So I really liked Violet Cassis, is that how you pronounce that down here? Mint Chocolate, which I, to this day, do not understand why they called this mint chocolate when it's like a dusty lavender color. Like, talk about strange. So weird. I do really like Champagne Rose and Praline and then Honey Lavender in here. I just really like that they took the more neutral side of thing and gave it a purple edge. I thought that that was really pretty, and it kind of fits with the more like purpley pink packaging too, and it's very purple on the inside as well. This was one of my more favorite holiday ones for sure. The quality is still not perfect on that one, but it's better than the other holiday ones that I've mentioned before. Okay, now here's where it starts to get like really old school for some of the holiday packaging. So this was the Everything Nice palette, and I never noticed it said that's what pretty girls are made of. I mean, I know it's from like that song or that nursery rhyme, but Okay, so this opens up and you've got a ton of eyeshadows in here along with blush, 2 blushes, a bronzer, and a highlighter. And this was the second year that they had done this type of packaging, and I really liked the first one, which we'll get to a little bit later. But this one was still quite interesting because the color selection was not too repeated from the previous one versus the other ones that I talked about. It was so consistently the same. However, you will notice what I just talked about before. You've got that random hot pink that is in every Too Faced large palette. You've got that sort of like evergreen with a turquoise edge to it, and there's a black. They started doing that so many times that I got fed up over the years. But in here, I actually really liked how they worked together because you've got a lot of more softer colors up here and a lot of really nice lid colors. Shiny Happy is one of those beautiful kind of silver but kind of gold shimmery colors. It's delightful. I also really liked Honey Pot. This kind of gold is quite nice. Marvelous is that sort of like shimmery lavender color. And I don't know, this palette was good, not as good as the A Few of My Favorite Things palette, which again, we'll get to. But it was nice to see this palette the year after the A Few of My Favorite Things palette, because they kind of kept with the theme of that one, but they just expanded on it a little bit with their color selection. Of course, after they did this one, then it started to get way too repetitive, because I guess they figured that they had a winner on their hand because this one had sold quite well and so had the previous year. So they're like, let's just do the same thing every year. So this was pretty much the last large one that I really enjoyed. Now I get to talk about one of the chocolate bar palettes, and this is the original. And I did pick it up when it was in that super chunky packaging, which I truly hate. Like, it's so bulky and annoying that it actually makes me not pull it out as often. And although I was starting to fall in love with Too Faced at the time that this launched, because I was super like enamored with the idea of a chocolate bar eyeshadow palette, and I love the smell on these. Oh man, that's so good. And I did enjoy this palette for a while, but I have to say, the colors are so dull. They're so dull. They're boring, and they're just very deflated almost. It's like I don't know, it's like a sad palette to me. The quality's fine, there's nothing wrong there, but the color selection is just so bland in comparison to all the other palettes that I have from Too Faced. I know that this has been a favorite of a lot of people's over the years, but for me, this was kind of, while it was fun when I first got it, it's just they've put out so many better launches since I first got this one. Okay, next was a palette that I was really excited to get, and then I got my hands on it, and I was so confused as to what I was supposed to do with it. This is the Clover palette, which I was really drawn into this by the packaging. I mean, it's oddly cutesy, which is not necessarily my aesthetic, but there's always been something about Too Faced that's really drawn me in. And the drawing style of these little cutesy animals definitely drew me in. Plus there's a black cat right here, so like. So the Clover palette, is a colorful palette, which made me really excited because Too Faced doesn't tend to do colorful palettes too often, and I really wanted to support the fact that they were putting out more color. So then I got my hands on it and I was looking at it and I'm like, but do the colors go together? So I find them to be very odd in here. Like, I love that there's a yellow, I love there's a purple, I love there's this random green over here, and there's a blue shimmery color. But when you go to put together looks with this, there's really no colorful matte deep shades aside from Daddy's Heart Me. So it becomes quite difficult to make looks out of this when all you've got is like a black deepener color, which I don't love using with colorful shadows because it tends to muddy them, or at least that's how it works for me. So I've pulled some nice looks out of this, but I don't always know what to do when I look at it, and often I'll pull it out and be like, nah, skip, grab another palette, because you know it's gonna be easier to put together an eye look with it. So while I do like it because they tried something new with this one, I just found it a little bit difficult to work with because the color selection ended up being so weird. Okay, now we're moving into the palettes that I definitely really like, and the first one is the Too Faced Sugar Pop palette. This came out quite a while ago, but this was another colorful palette that I really enjoyed playing with. I felt like the color selection here actually worked out really well together, but they ended up being quite subtle. The only weird thing about this palette is that Malted Milk Ball, this like brown, it's a shimmery brown with gold sparkle in it, is just terrible. Like, of all the colors in this palette that should have not worked well because they're colorful and some of them are matte and they tend to be a little bit translucent, especially when they're like this kind of like pale aqua color, those ended up being fine. But a brown shimmery color, which you would expect Too Faced to do well because they have so many neutral palettes, ended up being absolute trash. Like, they've got a huge dent in that sucker just because it took me so much effort to get it off on my brush and onto my eye that I've basically given up on that color completely. So aside from that garbage shade in this palette, this one ended up being a lot of fun. I really like Peach Fuzz as like a transition color. Strawberry Ice is really fun to play with too. I love Blue Raspberry. That is an absolutely phenomenal color. And Macaron up here, that orange with a little bit of gold glitter in it, is absolutely stunning. So this was a really fun palette, and one of my first few ones from Too Faced too. Here's the holiday palette that started it all for me. This is the A Few of My Favorite Things palette, and this came out in 2013, I believe, and it's the first one that they put out in this sort of like flip open packaging that was absolutely enormous. So same thing here, you get 2 bronzers, 2 blushes, and then the 20 eyeshadows that appear here. They are so nice. So freaking nice. The quality is good on this, although is this made in China? Because people were so mad that so many of Too Faced products were made in China. This one wasn't. Okay, bulk made in USA and assembled in the Dominican Republic. Well, this is the original one that I really liked, and I just found the quality to be absolutely exceptional on this. So many of the colors in here worked so well on the eyes. I especially loved Tinsel, Coquette, Snowflakes, and then the Blue Satin Sashes was a really good deepener outer corner color. I loved that one. This one I brought with me on vacation to Prague. I used it for like 2 weeks straight, I think it was, on that vacation, and I loved it. It was such good variety in this palette, and I mean, having the bronzers and blushes too was fantastic. So hands down my favorite holiday launch. No, that's not true. There's a better holiday one. That's at the top, actually. So this is hands down one of my favorite holiday launches for sure, and it's definitely like the oldest one. Okay, moving on to chocolate bar palettes that I actually did enjoy. The Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette. Pink is not necessarily my aesthetic, but I did like this one significantly more than the original chocolate bar palette. And it's really not for the pink shades in here, although they do tend to draw my eye towards the pink colors because they're so vibrant. I just ended up really liking the more gray cast tones of these neutrals. I loved Cashew Chew, Almond Truffle, Pecan Praline, and then Cafe au Lait is one of those beautiful lid colors that's just like it's a silver without being like Max Electra type color, which was a little bit much over the years for me. And I love Bordeaux here. It's a really phenomenal, oh, Molasses Chip, how could I forget about that one? This palette is fantastic, but it wasn't one I always reach for a lot because I don't tend to wear a lot of cool tone neutrals, but when I wanted a cool tone neutral, I would reach for this palette. So this one made me really happy. Although I hate the packaging. Like this pink with hearts thing. Yeah. Moving on to the Tutti Frutti collection, I have the Razzle Dazzle Berry Eyeshadow Palette. Now, the first thing I need to point out is that the eyeshadows in here are freaking phenomenal. The quality on this is some of the best that Too Faced has ever done. The mattes, which they've always done really well, are super, super lovely in here. But this shade in the near middle, what do you call it? Razzle, is this kind of like foiled texture that I have never seen Too Faced do before. Like never before have they done anything this buttery and slippery and just foiled. So the colors in here are gorgeous. Some of the best that Too Faced has ever done in terms of color schemes and quality. But the reason that it's a little bit further down on my list is that I cannot stand the smell of this palette. Like it is absolutely repugnant to me. It smells like, oh gee, like, I don't know, raspberry freezies, but like gone off to me anyway. And I'm not a huge like raspberry freezy flavor person. And the unfortunate thing is that the scent of this sticks around on your eyelids. Like if I put this on my eyes, and even if I like the look, hours later, I can still smell my eyelids. And how freaking weird is that, right? Like that's strange. So although the color selection is phenomenal, this is quite a bit down on my list because I can't with the scent. I cannot. Moving on to another chocolate bar palette. This is the Chocolate Gold, and this was a really nice palette. The shimmers in here are phenomenal, but one of the reasons it's not one of my favorite chocolate bar palettes is because there's just so much shimmer in here. And by the way, I did not hit pan on this shade. I accidentally dropped the palette and that shade cracked. So the bulk of this palette has beautiful lid colors, really, really gorgeous lid colors, because almost all of them are shimmer. The only mattes you're getting in here are 2 browns, this bone colored shade, and a black. And yeah, the black does work well to deepen up most of these colors because they are fairly neutral and not too colorful. But at the end of the day, I was just like, why have you given me such boring matte colors? I do still really like using this palette because the quality is fantastic, but as an overall whole as a palette, I feel like it's got some gaps in it just because the mattes are so neutral. Okay, now here's a more neutral tone palette that I actually really enjoy, and this is again was part of the Tutti Frutti collection. This one is the Sparkling Pineapple palette. And this is more neutral, but it's got that wonderful quality textured shimmery eyeshadow that I mentioned in the Raspberry eyeshadow palette. Particularly the shade over here. Oh no, I don't know if it's backwards or forwards. I think this one, oh yeah, okay, this one's Pineapple Cooler, and it is so lovely. Again, it's that foiled, almost wet feeling texture that Too Faced like never does. I don't know why they're only in the Tutti Frutti palettes. I wish they did it in more of their palettes. And yeah, this one's just really fun to play with. I really like this sort of green brown shimmer. The gold is lovely. The complementary matte shadows, which are more neutral in tone, work really well for this palette. And the scent is not offensive. It just smells slightly like sunscreen, like fruity pineapple type sunscreen. This is a great palette, and I do actually reach for this way more than I thought I would. I bought this one with the Raspberry palette because I wanted to get sort of like the whole collection, but I definitely preferred this one. Okay, we're getting towards the end, and these are definitely starting to get a little bit harder to pick between which ones are my favorite. The next one is the Totally Cute palette, and this ended up being totally cute. And I just love the color selection in here. It was another quite shimmery palette, but I felt like the shimmery darker colors still sort of worked in the outer corner of my eye, which is really good. Everything from the color selection to the shade names in here made me really happy. This one's called Unicorn, this one's Shooting Star. The top one up here is called Bunny Foo Foo. How cute. Clover, I love that name. And then this one's called Meow down here. Like, come on, like I was sold on this palette from the get-go. And the shadows turned out to be really nice too. I've got some significant dents in some of these shadows. Clover and Stormcloud have some big dents as well as Meow. So this was such a lovely tiny launch from Too Faced. And you know, now that I think about it, they don't make these are 9 pans, right? Yeah, they don't make these 9-pan palettes anymore, which is a little bit of a shame because I thought they were really cute and like sweet like collector items. Okay, here's one that I think a lot of people are gonna be surprised about because most people trashed this palette. Like it was just hated amongst most of the beauty community, but I ended up actually really liking it. The White Chocolate Bar palette. This was a super limited launch for the holidays quite a few years ago, and I know some people really wanted it and were never able to get their hands on it, but most people that got their hands on it ended up hating it. However, I'm not one of those people. Now, this palette is a little bit strange. It's got a lot of really pale shades, which makes sense. It is the White Chocolate Bar palette, but a lot of this really can't be used just by itself, and that's primarily because you've got some really crap shades in here too. So for the most part, I love the lid shades like Sugared Raisin, Indulge, Exotica, and a lot of the like mid-tone colorful shadows make really great transition colors in the crease. But the shades that you would want to sort of work with in this in order to make it a more complete look, like Chocolate Syrup up here and then Smoked Sea Salt, are awful. Those two shadows are so bad. They don't blend out with anything in here. They go on really patchy. They're just really terrible. But disregarding those, the rest of the palette is so intriguing to me and worked so well on the eyes that I just ended up really liking this palette. And you know, I still go back to it. I still find this to be an interesting palette. I don't think it would work on anybody who is a medium skin tone or deeper, but on my pale skin, this actually works out really well. And I have brought this with me on vacation before in connection with another palette too, because I can't just get a single look out of this. But I really enjoyed it, and you know, it's near my top few favorites of palettes, so I really like that one. Yeah, I'm looking at these palettes left over, and this is where it gets dicier and dicier about picking favorites because they're all really good. Okay, the next one is the Tickled Peach palette. I've mentioned before that the Sweet Peach scent is one of my favorites that Too Faced does, but they only put out the original Sweet Peach palette, and then this one with this scent profile, aside from the face palette, but I'm only talking about eyeshadow palettes today. So this is this tiny baby palette, again, with 8 shades, and this one is like an additional like 8 shades that kind of complement the original Sweet Peach palette. And honestly, it works fine by itself, but it works really well with the other palette too. I just liked having more shades in the peach Sweet Peach range. So this one's fun to play with, especially this color down here. What do you call Peach Spice? Nope. No, Tickled. That one's really lovely. I like the one above it too, called Warm and Fuzzy. It's just a really sweet, cute palette, and it's the quality is fantastic, and I love that it's compact. It's great for travel. If you need a quick eyeshadow look, grab one of these suckers because they're lovely. Oh man, is this... I don't know if this one's discontinued. This might have been one of those holiday things. Oops. Sticking with the small palettes, the Hot Buttered Rum palette. What a knockout this one ended up being. And I do like it more than the Tickled Peach one. Just because it's slightly different. Like, I feel like this is the peanut butter and honey palette that we should have gotten. Because you've got more of like that honey yellow color here, a more warm toned brown, and then you've got some like kind of creamy honey, not yellow tone colors, but more like in the rusty sort of golden area. This shade up here, what are you called? Born to Rum, is very lovely, and all of the matte colors, like the deepener colors, are the kinds that I really like in terms of neutrals. So this palette super appealed to me. I love this thing to pieces. Okay, next is the Just Peachy Mattes palette. This is a phenomenal palette that I just don't use enough because it's strictly matte shadows, and for whatever reason I don't, even though I love matte colors, I just forget to reach for it because usually I want some sort of shimmer in my look too. But whenever I use this thing, I'm just reminded of how good it is. And the colors in here, although they can look very, I don't know, monochromatic, you can pull out some knockout looks with this. This shade over here, Just Peachy, looks so boring, so bland. It looks like not that vibrant. You put it on the eyes and it's basically a neon. Like, it's shocking how bright that color looks. And of course I love Peach Punch and Peach Sangria. Oh, this is a phenomenal palette. I should really use this soon in a one of my get ready with me videos because it's really nice. But I don't like it as much as the Sweet Peach one, and that's just because I feel like there's more variety in the Sweet Peach one, and plus the scent on the Peaches and Cream palette is not nearly as nice. Okay, this one just ended up being just outside of the top 5 palettes, so this one is number 6 from the top. This is the Stardust palette by Vegas Nay, and this is predominantly neutral, and I picked it up at a time where I was very obsessed with Too Faced, and I didn't know anything about Vegas Nay. I've since learned that she's like an Instagram star or whatever, but I grabbed it because I just wanted to have all the Too Faced stuff, and honestly this ended up being one of the best palettes in my Too Faced collection because the tones of the neutral colors in here just look freaking flattering on my eyes when I apply them. No matter what combination I use of these colors up here combined with Double Tap, it just looks super flattering. So I'm always reaching for this palette when I like want to wear something neutral and I know I want to look good, and it's never let me down. I don't really reach for these two purple colors here that much. I mostly stick to like the neutrals, which is strange for me, and then this bottom row down here, and man, what a knockout palette this was. And I honestly thought that this was going to be a nothing palette in my collection, but it's really good. Okay, we've hit the top 5, and honestly sorting this out was difficult. And even now I'm not convinced that I got the order right, but these are definitely my top 5 Too Faced palettes in my collection. We're gonna start at number 5, the Too Faced Peanut Butter and Jelly palette. So good. So good. When they launched this, I was just like awestruck on how awesome this one was. I love the fact that the 3 colors on the side are not just that boring, almost bone colored shade and variations thereof. Like what they did with the freaking honey palette. What was going on there? I love that they expanded on the peanut butter shade from the semi-sweet chocolate bar palette and basically just blew it up in here. This gold tone is probably one of the most flattering golds that I've ever worn. And then all of these like peanut butter, peanut brittle, and nuts about you shadows are so nice to wear. And then mix that in with the 2 purples like Jelly and Jammin', and this is such a lovely palette. At one point I had actually bought a backup of it, and then I realized that I was not finishing this eyeshadow palette anytime soon. I think I ended up doing a blog giveaway with it. But yeah, this is such a special palette, and it was limited edition, and then they made it permanent, and then they've since taken it away, but it's it's a good one. So the shadow that inspired that palette is in this palette. This is the Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar palette, and hands down, this is my favorite chocolate bar palette that Too Faced makes. It's long since been discontinued, but the reason I like this one so much is just because the neutrals are more up my alley, which is to say that they're more warm toned and orange. And of course, the peanut butter and jelly palette was inspired by the peanut butter shadow in this palette, and that was one of my absolute favorites in this one. There's just so much good stuff in here, and I tend to like this because it does scream a little bit more warm tone to me, but there is quite a few like neutral cool tones in here, like rum raisin, pudding, and then hot fudge. Yeah, hot fudge up there do lean more on the cool side of things. So if you're looking for something that's not just warm toned, you could have this and have your cool tones as well. And I brought this with me on vacation so many times, and I can't get enough of this palette. I'm surprised I haven't hit pan on it. There's a few shadows here that look like they're past due for hitting pan, but this is a very much a treasured palette for me, and I was really sad when they discontinued it. Okay, the palette that started the peach craze, the Sweet Peach palette. I got this on its initial launch, and then they sold out and then brought it back later, and I tell you what, even though the hype was so real on this one, it was there for a reason. This is a freaking phenomenal palette. I just love it every single time that I use it. The tones in here are more on the peach side of neutral, but you've got some really vibrant shades in here as well. Candied peach, oh my god, I am such a sucker for that shadow. I put it through my crease all the time, and I just freaking love it. Luscious up here, boring champagne color, right? But for whatever reason, I'm in love with that particular champagne color. And I mean, it also helps that the palette is scented so lovely. It's just that candied peach scent that I much prefer over the peaches and cream scent. Although I know it gave a few people a headache, so maybe that's why they moved over to the more peaches and cream scent. But yeah, these two transition colors down here, Puree and Summer Yum, lovely. I just love this palette. And this is top 3, so this is my third most favorite Too Faced palette. Okay, second to last, Life's a Festival palette. Oh, I've raved about this so much, and so many people have told me that they've picked it up based on my recommendation and that they found that it made it easier for them to use color, and that made me so happy. So I'm a sucker for rainbows, and then when you open it, it's got this kind of like, they're not pastel rainbow colors, but I would say that they're more subtle in terms of tone. The bulk of this palette is shimmery, and I do find that I use more of these colors on the lid than I do in the outer corner. But that being said, I've put together looks with this just using strict shimmers, and somehow it still comes out looking so, so beautiful. And there isn't honestly a shadow in here that I don't adore. I play with this all the time, and I'm always so like, I don't know, like in awe of my own looks with this, but that's because the color selection is so good that they all really just work together so well. One of the most interesting colors in this palette is Mystic Rain, and I have never seen a color like that. It's like a lavender with a teal shift to it. It is so pretty. But honestly, this whole thing in general is just lovely, and it was limited edition a few years ago. I mean, so many products are limited edition, it breaks my heart, but this was really special, and just hearing how many people also bought this palette and how much they ended up liking it really made me happy. Okay, whew, I've been talking forever, it feels like. We've hit number 1, and I think a lot of people thought I was going to say Life's a Festival was my number 1 palette by Too Faced, but I gotta say, Gingerbread Spice, the original one, is my number 1 favorite palette by Too Faced. There was just such a good array of shades in here. I loved how they leaned into like some jewel tone colors, but also made some really vibrant matte colors. Gumdrop and Spice is Nice are just so freaking lovely. And this does lean more towards the warm side of things, which is why I really enjoy it. Especially like Gingerbread and Oh Snap and Gingerbread Latte are very much on the more warm side of brown colors. The most exciting color in this palette though is Hot Toddy, which I've never seen Too Faced do a shadow like that. It's like, it changes color depending on what angle you look at it. So it can look golden amber colored in certain angles, and then you shift it and then it goes like molten magenta. It's It's so freaking nice. And I even love like Frostbite Me over here, which is like this really flaky, silvery white color, which can, I'm sure, piss a few people off just because it is quite flaky, but I kind of like it because it makes me think of like crystallized snow. So I really like that aspect of it. Honestly, I can't rave enough about this palette, and I think they relaunched it for like Christmas in July. Was it last year? Was it the year before? Which was a little bit odd, but honestly it allowed for more people to get their hands on this palette, so that made me happy. Anyway, yeah, this one is an absolute knockout and therefore my absolute favorite Too Faced palette. Okay, that was a lot to talk about. When you have that many palettes by one brand, it ends up being quite a long slog to get through them all. But I hope you found this interesting. I have ditched a lot of Too Faced palettes over the years just because I didn't love them and there was no sense in keeping them. Like, you'll notice the Nikki Tutorial palette is nowhere in this collection because I hate that thing intensely. That would probably be the worst one I've ever used, to be honest. Okay, anyway, that's enough talking for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you next time. Bye.